I like salad. Do you like salad?
Hi, I'm Ho Shun Ho. I'm living in Vancouver, BC, Canada, unceded territory of Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. I'm an immigrant to Canada from China.
Hey everyone, I'm Andrea coming to you from Victoria, but more importantly known as unceded Akwesasne territory of the Lekwungen-speaking peoples, the Songhees and Esquimalt First Nations, and I am an immigrant from the United States of America. And you're listening to
Canadian Salad.
Canadian Salad.
Ooh, welcome
Hi,
back.
Hoshin. Welcome back,
Hi.
all you wonderful listeners out there. And you too, Hoshin. Although, do you listen to our podcast?
Of course.
Would I consider you a listener? I don't know. Some people have a weird thing about they don't like hearing their voice. And so they're like, oh, I never listened to it.
Maybe I'm delusional. I love my voice.
I love my voice too. I do listen to our episodes because I like... Well, I'm very critical of myself. I'm like, oh, you should have wrapped it in this way, which I have to be very honest to our listeners. If you listen to our last episode, season 2, episode 1, Defining Us, I said that Tibet was a country. It's not. And you were right, Hoshin. You were right. You're like, it's a region in China. No, it's a country. Anyway, I'm sorry. I apologize. I was wrong. So that's why I listened to my...
It was an independent state before.
Yeah?
It was an independent state before, but I think country, I guess how we define country, you know.
Yeah.
I assume you have to have diplomatic relationship with other, or like, I don't know, maybe UN recognized, I don't know, or have a passport to be considered a country, but they never had that. But I know that it used to be independent state.
Okay.
And then it was taken over.
It was, yeah. I've had Tibetan tea. But that doesn't mean anything as far as my knowledge of Tibet, right? So anyway, my apologies. You were totally right. And so, but that is why we listen to our podcast and we have that reflection. So
yeah, because not everything we think or said, sometimes what we said is not always true. Even though as we try to be as truthful as possible, we look into data, look into research, we try to look for credible sources, but not everything we said is 100% true or correct. Because also
like AI.
Yeah. I don't know
Only
about
with
that.
personality. No?
No, I don't think so. I think this, I don't know. I don't think that's a compliment. I'm better than AI.
We are better than AI. Absolutely.
Exactly.
And we are better because we've created a topic today. Well, we haven't created a topic, but this was a big deal this past week. There's a brand new magazine that is coming out called 3. And
1, 2, 3.
Yes. Yeah. Just 3 though. It's a new magazine to challenge newcomer stereotypes and telling stories of third culture kids. So it is published in a partnership with a 369 Global Inc. and SJC Media, which is Canada's largest portfolio of media brands. It's a fancy high-end magazine, but it prioritizes stories that resonate beyond borders and celebrates people who live beyond boundaries. So so I subscribed beyond boundaries. Yeah. It's pretty, like the photography is really nice. I feel like it's the newcomer Vogue magazine. So if immigrants could have a Vogue kind of look, it's pretty awesome. So we'll include the link in our show notes. Yeah. Vanity Fair. Yeah. Exactly. It's the Vanity Fair for immigrants. Yes. So, but that was launched. CBC Radio and News interviewed the founder of the magazine. His name is, my apologies to the person if they're listening, Muraly Srinarayanathas. And he's a third culture kid, which is the 3 in this magazine. And that's what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, we're going to talk about third culture kids.
Third culture kids, which to distinguish, TCK. It is not to say that they are third world country kids, which it's interesting that I actually read in researching for this. A lot of people assumed, third culture kids, they must be like third world kids. No, that's not what we're talking about. So we're going to expand. Yeah.
We're going to expand that. Yeah. I mean, that term also is confusing, not just because of third culture part, also the kid part. Actually, it talks more than kids, like
more than
adults.
Kids. Yeah. We're not talking about 5-year-olds who pick their nose and have boogers. We're talking about adults who pick their nose and have boogers.
Yeah,
Yes.
We know you pick your boogers.
I do. I just wiped one on the microphone just now.
Ew.
You're welcome. Just kidding. Anyway, so Hoshin, you're gonna maybe give us the lowdown of third culture kid, yeah?
Yeah, gonna drop it down to the floor. I'm
Boom.
kidding. Yeah, so gonna talk about third culture kids. I know that as we mentioned, their name can be really confusing because first it's not from third country, and also it's not necessarily just about kids.
Yes.
Yeah, you talk about adults too. It's actually mostly adults.
Yeah, that's true. People. Yeah.
People, individuals. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So this term, third culture kid, is coined by American sociologists Ruth Useem.
Okay.
In the 1950s.
Good old Ruth. Thank you, Ruth.
Thank you, Ruth. We applaud. Yeah.
Yes.
Your intelligence.
Yes.
She used it in her studies of expatriates living in India. Ruth's focus was on children when she first started doing her research. Was focused on children whose parents had moved abroad for career purposes, like maybe they're diplomats or missionaries or members of military.
Yeah, right.
So they move a lot, yes. And in an article she wrote, a third culture kid is a person who has spent a significant part of his or her developmental years outside their parents' culture.
Okay.
The third culture kid builds relationships to all the cultures while not having full ownership in any. That's the definition of it.
Yeah. Ooh.
So
anyway, that's
where the third comes from. The first one is your parents' culture. That's first.
Okay.
Second is the host culture, which usually means the culture you're living in.
Okay.
Spend most of your developmental years in. And the third culture is the kids' culture, like the individual's own culture, while combining both the first and the second, and maybe your exposure to other cultures. So you blend all of this, become a third. So that's why the word third came in.
Okay. Yeah. Gotcha. It just sounds hard.
There's so many elements. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and just to unpack that, I'm trying to imagine what that would be like. And I can imagine that would be extremely complex, which again, everyone who's listening, we talk about the complexity of identity, and and this is where, at least in the Western Hemisphere, we really fall short, where we just put people in these very narrow boxes. Well, based on your passport, you're this. Well, no, that's not necessarily true. Or based where you were born, that's where you're from. Well, no, that's not necessarily true. There is just so many layers, and there's so many multiple aspects in our globalized world that make us really complex. We have to allow space for that.
Yeah, right? I agree. I think we like to put people in a box because we're lazy, because it's easier for us to understand or try to understand where people are from, so we can feel safe, because these things that are easy to understand are safer. Unknowns are always for us is terrifying.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
So I understand. Yeah. Go on.
No, go ahead.
No, I understand that notion, but then to a certain point, we have to also understand people are inherently complex, especially in a globalization world, right?
Yes. And we are incredibly capable.
Exactly. We are capable.
I think the other day I was thinking about fear, and I came up with this kind of like conclusion that how we fear change and how we fear difference says more about how we were taught to fear rather than how we were taught to dream. Right? Like, we're not taught to imagine. We're not taught to question or really be okay with no answer. We're really taught to, well, no, that's different. And I've heard terrible stories, so you should be afraid. At least from my own experience, if anything was different, it was like, just stay clear of that. Whereas as a child, I grew up with a big curiosity of the world. And even now with my own son, we talk about gender, or we might talk about skin color. And I was like, skin color is just a difference of melanin. That's all it is, right? That's it. There's nothing different about that person between you and I. Like, we are very much the same in the sense, not that we don't ignore their melanin, but we understand that there's multiple things about us that make us people. And so when we talk about other people or kids, or even they might be from Canada, but they might be from somewhere else, or they might be a he, a she, a they. We don't know. We're not going to create these conclusions about people in the same way that third culture kids are very much an integrated reflection of a very diverse and beautiful global phenomenon or a global embodiment,
Yeah,
right? Yeah.
it really is. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you're also, to be on your, what you just said, it reminds me of a clip I saw. It's like I think it's like a YouTube video or something about experiment. I think a guy was like draw a circle on a piece of paper and ask the adults, what is this? Most adults just say it's a circle.
Mm.
Some people say, a ball. Like maybe some people say that, but
Yeah.
most people just say it's a circle. And then they use the same thing to ask kids, what is that? The same circle. The kids will say, it's the moon, it's a ball, it's a clock, it's a cookie.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that video, the example also represents that we as adults, we're so conditioned to put things in a box. Like that circle, it's just a circle. It cannot be more than that. But for kids, anything full of possibility of anything else. That circle can represent a cookie, a ball, the moon, the clock. Humans too, I think they see human as more than what they look like. I think kids see humans as more than a circle. We can be a cookie. We can be a ball. We can be a melon.
Yeah. Yes.
And I wish
true.
sometimes,
if I have too much, if I have too much food, I get really bloated and I look like a melon and it's not lovely. Yeah.
So I feel like we should more like kids. When they see a human, don't always see them by what they represent, like, just physically.
Yeah,
we should imagine, what if they are a ball? What if they are a cookie?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, and kids don't have their development fully there yet. And yet they can still have a diverse perspective of things. I feel like somewhere along the way, we forget that, or we're told that's not how you think about things anymore. And I think that's especially true of even third culture kids or TCKs. So the impact of that, often within research and social circles, they are often the hidden immigrant, in the sense of, when you study acculturation, integration models, they're left in the dark because they don't fit a very unique or very specific box or definition, right? There was a really great article that came out of the Journal of Cross-Cultural Family Studies. And it's a literature review of a bunch of different people who studied culture, acculturation, cross-cultural kids, which is another aspect of identity related to children who experience different cultures, but it is different than third culture kids. But they talk about how within the context of these studies, often how they socialize, how they integrate is different than immigrants who maybe come to a country. Maybe they come just from one country or they come from multiple countries. And that their struggle, because maybe verbally they can talk very high proficient English, but racially, they might look something else, or culturally, they might experience something else. So people assume things about them based upon what they see or what they hear. But reality is their third culture. Their own culture is very different than what the outsider will see. And so navigating that complexity is hard, and it often makes them hidden. The second aspect of it is that you had said that lovely Ruth, had developed this term based on children who were children the family of like maybe diplomats or military or people with money, right? And so often a lot of people will say, well, that third culture kids are very privileged. They're very different than immigrants, but that's not the truth. There was this great quote out of this gentleman. He is a third culture kid and he has a blog. We'll include it in our show notes, but he says, quote, "We're not all just diplomats and oligarchs. We're immigrants who are the offspring of immigrants. Even my parents didn't have a home. I am from nowhere." End quote. Right? That this idea that, expats or maybe you are a child of a diplomat or a business person or someone with maybe more financial security. But that doesn't mean that there's still these struggles that they face, right? So a lot of the struggles that third culture kids, and I would love to get a third culture kid on our podcast to share their story. That's coming down the line, folks. But a lot of what they struggle with is cultural roots. Establishing a sense of like, I can root myself into this culture. Maybe they could root themselves into Canadian culture, but it's still very different than the culture of their parents, the culture that they experience in their developmental years versus the culture that they're creating now. Sometimes there's a lot of disconnect to the parents' culture, right?
Yeah.
So they feel a level of disconnection. My father was raised in Bangladesh and my mother was raised in America, but I'm living in England. And so I don't relate to either of them, yet they are my parents and we are all in the same home. So how do we navigate that? How do I relate to my kids culturally? How do I teach them cultural values of where they came from when really they didn't come from those places in the sense of being raised in it?
I know it's a very mixed identity, right?
Yes.
That these kids or individuals, and they assume they're influenced like both like by their parents' culture and also the culture they are raised in or spend a lot of their developmental years in.
Yeah.
So they both influence this person, and yet neither of this culture they are rooted in.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it's a constant pull and push
Yes.
within their own identity.
Yes.
So I feel itself is definitely a struggle because like for me, I'm constantly thinking, oh, what is my different? Like I've also brought in many ways experienced many cultures, lived in many places. But then the thing is always at a root because I'm Chinese. I always see myself a Chinese culturally.
Got kind of like
Chinese.
A compass that kind of keeps you. Yeah.
Exactly. So in this kind of cultural identity conversation, I always know for myself that I'm culturally Chinese. I have something to bound myself in. And then, but also, of course, I also see myself that have also a lot of other elements and cultural influence by a lot of the other culture that I experienced or lived or learned. But I know like the core of me is from somewhere. And I think these third culture kids, they don't always have that kind of root and core for them to hold on when identity, sometimes maybe if identity crisis comes in and which part, if I have to choose which one would I be more comfortable to identify with.
And even trying to respond to the culture around you and navigating your identity with other people who want to make assumptions about who you are or really try to want to narrow you down to a specific, well, no, you really are. Where are your roots?
Yeah. Oh, where you call home? Like where you like even the question. That's why in our previous episodes we said like where you come from. That question can be very loaded for some people.
It can be.
Yeah, because do you mean like my nationality, my culture, my parents' culture? Like where we sign? What is that question? Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. No, it's very complicated. There's other things too. The identity formation piece, like we're talking a little bit about, third culture kids really have a unique position where they are creating their own identities because for many, they are beyond that developmental phase. So third culture might be experienced when you're 17 or maybe when you're 22. It might be when you're an older person, maybe 55. But that identity formation is really complicated because then you have almost, how do you choose? How do you navigate that agency of choosing who you are and defining yourself? The other thing is dual loyalties, like feeling a sense of, I need to be loyal to my parents' cultures. I need to be loyal to maybe some very developmental cultures that I experienced, like maybe it might be friends, really close friends. It might be some things that you picked up in your childhood that you're like, this is very special to me, but it's not observed or practiced here in this country. How do I want a sense of loyalty to that. So there's that. And then there's something to that emotional resilience, I think, and this is going to segue into the incredible positives and the incredible gifts that third culture kids are to Canada and to the rest of us as people. But that emotional resilience, that ability to navigate difference and nuance, and it creates some very compassionate, very understanding people. There's a very good article out of CBC back in 2019, and they interviewed a gentleman, and the title is called "Who Am I? A Third Culture Kid Finds Himself in Canada." So he says, "My sense of identity was confused because I wasn't as good as the French kid. I wasn't as British as the British person. I didn't have a sense of being a Canadian at a certain point in my life. And I certainly wasn't Mexican. So I was always other." He was born in Mexico. He moved to France as a boy, and then he came to Canada when he was 15. But he says that what rooted him and what made him find himself in Canada was actually finding other third culture kids. It was finding other communities that experienced what he experienced and understood where he was coming from, like his perspective. So one thing about third culture kids is that they are very open-minded and curious. So we talked about the idea and basically the ingenue behind the magazine 3, Muraly, and he says on his website, he says, quote, "Our cultural adaptability, global perspectives, and effective cross-cultural communication will contribute significantly to the social and professional landscape of the country of Canada. Understanding and celebrating the unique journey of third culture kids is not just an acknowledgement of our diverse backgrounds, but an investment in the richness of Canada's collective identity," end quote. So he lives in Toronto. So he's been in Canada for a while. And so they have this ability to adapt, to understand cross-cultural communication in a way that I think a lot of business executives, C-suites, a lot of even myself navigating all of my friendships and even the ways in which people communicate, like I really have to sit with that and learn it and really try to digest it and be curious. Whereas third culture kids already have that kind of embedded in them. They already have this sense of, I'm going to adapt, and I could see where you're coming from because I had to navigate this. Right?
They have so many mix of culture and perspective already in them because they have experienced so much both from the culture that we sign and the culture from their parents. I feel like also they are so used to being adaptable, so used to adapt to new things because they were challenged their whole life by different perspective and cultural elements. So I think they're easy to navigate between different ideas, different social groups, I think.
And creative, right? Again, not being taught to fear, but being taught to dream beyond what being taught to, or experiencing a world in which, oh, that worked here. It didn't work here. Oh, that's this color here, but actually it's this color here. Being challenged to see the world through so many different lenses creates this innovation and this perspective that you're not going to settle for what is. You actually compel yourself to create what you want it to be.
Exactly. And I think they probably also have way more tools in their tool belts, right? Because they also experience more. So they must also have way more solutions to the one-to-one problem. Because they had, again, they just experience more than the average person.
Yeah, which is the last point. I think there's a really good scholar out there. His name is Dave Pollard, and he's written a few books on culture and integration. He's Canadian too. And so he has this article. It's called "What Third Culture Kids Might Teach Us About Coping with Collapse." And in it, he talks about how if you look at social and economic trends, like the housing is really bad and like inflation is high and all of these different aspects of our like environmental change, like we are experiencing a lot of challenges there. And so migration and immigration is so much more fluid now. And his point is that actually, quote, "Third culture kids are natural mentors for the rest of us as we cope slowly over decades with radical change to our ways of living, thinking, and being. They've had practice making dramatic cultural shifts, accommodating different ways of thinking, different beliefs and priorities, and different ways of doing things, dealing with the sheer bewilderment of it all," end quote. And so I think, to conclude, I think it's really exciting because identity is complex it is, and as much as people struggle with it, I think this is what's beautiful about immigrants, about third culture kids, about people with a lived global experience, that we can create solutions, we can dream ideas and futures that we want to create without being saddled or held down by tradition, by, let's say, I mean, we've talked about colonialism and capitalism and all the isms. Like, we don't have to be drowning in that. We can actually be uplifted by questions and by creativity and by difference and by all of these things that is embodied in our natural world. Difference and evolution and change and beauty and mosaic and rainbows, right? There's just so much to it. So I don't know what you think, Hoshin.
I think I absolutely agree with you that they definitely form this kind of blend. I think a third culture could form a cultural hybrid, right? They are a blend of cultures. They have so many like elements within them, no matter it's conflict resolution, cultural norms, or ways of collaboration.
Yeah.
Like they are, I would say, a encyclopedia of human behavior or human ideas. So so like whenever whatever kind of situation they are put in, they probably already have been there before. They know whatever human interaction with what they participate in, they probably already been there before, right? So they can face it with ease. I know what it is. Been there. I know how to do it.
Yeah.
There's no difficult people for me to handle because
I've dealt with a lot of difficult people already. Yeah.
Exactly. And we can definitely learn a lot from them, obviously.
I think so.
Yeah, we can definitely learn a lot from them.
Yeah. And I would love, like, again, I would love to invite, and I'll be working on that, inviting a third culture to speak and give maybe their story of what it was like integrating into Canada and navigating that space. So please stay tuned. But thanks, Hoshin. I mean, this is something, we're not third culture kids. I think you can definitely relate to some of which culture do I root myself in this moment in time, whether I'm with my immigrant friends, my white friends, my international friends. Like there is this kind of identity piece of navigating, but I do feel like they are not hidden people. And I just hope that if you are a third cultural kid, you hear that you're not hidden, that you are absolutely beautiful and essential and a part of what makes the Canadian salad.
Yeah, and knowing, and maybe like also take refuge in knowing that you have so much to offer to society, and you are the future of our society, I would say. With globalization, with technology, but I think third culture kids are literally the beacon of how where our society is going. Eventually, maybe we don't have the root in a particular culture. Maybe we can root ourselves in this cosmopolitan society, and we are all part of this world of its citizens, not just a rainbow of cultures.
Yeah, we are. Yes. I love it. That's beautifully said. Beautifully said. So we are going to attack our Canadian Salad Pop Quiz. If you're new to this podcast, thank you so much for listening to this episode. At the end of every episode, we do a pop quiz based on Canadian culture, history, facts, whatever it is. And neither of us know the answer to the other person's question. We haven't been prepped. So, and dramatic elements to the cast. So, my love, Hoshin, would you like to go first?
Oh, okay. I can go first. Okay. So like we mentioned, third culture kids are usually, because parents are from one culture and they live in a foreign country.
Yes.
And then they are generally the third culture kid, right?
Okay.
And based on that definition, do you know what is the percentage of TCK, third culture kid in Canada?
Hoshin, this was my question too. I know. This happens too sometimes, everyone. Like we pick the same question. So let's see if I have the right source compared to yours.
Okay.
So I'm going to say that's 20%.
20%? That's not the data I have.
Oh, no. Okay. What do you have? What do you have?
I have a data from the website of Statistic Canada in 2016. It's a 2016 census research. That is about 37.5% of total population of Canadian children that are born in a household with foreign born parents.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Well, you are correct.
Where did you get the 20%?
It was from someone who was talking about their third culture kid experience, and they quoted Statistics Canada 2017 and said that 20% of Canada's population are third culture kid. So I don't know if that stat that you mentioned. Anyway, you're right. So I think this person maybe generalized it. I looked for a resource as like a citation when they didn't cite it. So that is my bad. That is me not being a good research person.
That is okay, because I am one. We compensate each other.
We do. Sometimes I'm right. But 2 weeks in a row, I have not been right. First Tibet, and now the stats can. Anyway,
that is okay. Like I said, we're kind to ourselves. We are not perfect, we do this. That's why we have each other.
We do, yes.
Keep each other accountable.
We do.
Information to get out. So I would put my link
Yes,
of the
we
data
will.
on the website. So we have the credible source as from TCKs, the website.
Not Andrea. Exactly. And our website is canadiansalad.ca. You can actually follow us on TikTok and Instagram. It's Canadian Salad. And please leave us a comment. We drop a new full episode every Tuesday, and then every Friday we've got a sassy spill the tea response to negative and hateful comments called Dishes Out. So don't miss that. That's every Friday. And those are really short and sassy and non-statistical.
Exactly. Also, we love good comments too. So if you want to have any good thing to say to us, please say to our face.
Yes.
Our faces.
Yes. Say to our faces. Drop us a DM in our socials, or you can actually reach out to us on our website. There is a form you can fill out. Love to hear your ideas. You can sign up for our newsletter. There's so many ways to stay connected. So just do it, people.
I know.
Yes.
Exactly. Leave a comment on our podcast too. Give us a star review, 5-star review, obviously.
Oh, of course. Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. And share it with your family and friends. We are a walking DEI in your pocket. So
exactly. We are. We have so much information for you. You are so welcome.
You're welcome.
Okay.
So have a wonderful week, everyone. And we will talk to you soon. Okay.
Talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye.
Canadian Salad is written and produced in British Columbia, Canada by Hoshin Ho and Andrea McCoy. Theme music is by Naver Avetyan from Pixabay.
This has been a good Janklin production.